Two large storms will be coming to the United States over the next few days, and this will bring the threat of severe weather to areas like the Midwest, northern and central plains, and perhaps the Ohio Valley, where damaging winds, large hail, and also a few tornadoes will be a possibility. In addition to this, we are watching the Caribbean Sea very closely because we could have our next hurricane entering the Gulf of Mexico as we go into next week. So in today's forecast, we're going to break down exactly what you need to know about the weather across the United States over the next 7 to 10 days, and we'll begin with what's happening across the United States this morning. And I've got to say, this is probably the quietest start to a forecast that we've ever had when it comes to the infrared imagery. There's almost nothing going on right now across the entire lower 48. Really, the only area that's dealing with anything notable, which this is something we're going to be talking about today because there is a threat for severe weather, is that trough that is circling back up in the northern plains. This did end up bringing a couple of storms yesterday that actually did have some rotation back up in North Dakota, but overall, nothing too crazy yesterday. I do think today, though, will be a completely different story, as we are going to be talking about a very elongated area for severe weather from Minnesota all the way back through Oklahoma. We'll be talking all about that here in just a couple of minutes. Back over on the East Coast, there is some shower and thunderstorm activity just offshore, a few showers leaking into New England, but again, nothing out of the ordinary. And then for the rest of the country, it is relatively dry for now. Now let's talk more about the severe weather potential for the next few days, and we'll begin with today, which is tossing trampolines on tall trees Thursday. We do currently have a large slight risk for severe weather that does extend anywhere from northeastern Oklahoma all the way back up into Minnesota and Wisconsin, and there's also a marginal threat that goes into the same sort of areas, central Oklahoma all the way back through Wisconsin and the upper Michigan Peninsula. Now, the main concern for today will be damaging winds. There's also a hatched risk for large to very large hail, meaning that we could see some hailstones upwards of tennis ball to baseball sized hail back up in parts of Minnesota and as well as Wisconsin. And the main concerns for today will be damaging winds. This will be pretty scattered in nature. We'll also have a potential for some relatively significant hail back over in parts of western Wisconsin, northern Iowa, and eastern Minnesota, where we could see some hailstones as high as baseball-sized hail. So definitely make sure to protect your vehicle today. One of the concerns that we are going to be watching for very closely today is the tornado risk. I would not be surprised if we do have some sort of small-scale severe weather outbreak today, including all modes of severe weather, and one of which will be the potential for tornadoes. There is a 5% tornado risk for a large chunk of eastern Minnesota and western Wisconsin, and there's also a 2% tornado risk, which is a little bit more conditional for those in Iowa and also around the Kansas City area. I do think we'll be live today, so make sure that you are subscribed down below and click the bell icon so you're notified when we go live later today. Now, the tornado threat for today is on the low to medium side, anywhere from Minnesota all the way back into Kansas and Missouri, and really the main corridor that we're going to be watching for will be from about 3 to about 9 o'clock today. So any time during that time frame, definitely make sure that you have a tornado action plan ready to go and multiple ways to receive alerts. Right now, the tornado parameter values are the highest in this corridor, and that's again anywhere from eastern Minnesota all the way back into northwest Missouri, right around 4 to 5 o'clock. And notice those tornado parameter values are not super high, but any area of discrete supercellular activity that does develop later today will be capable of producing a tornado threat, especially I think in southeast Minnesota and also far western Wisconsin. I really think our greatest concern is going to be just to the south and east there of Minneapolis. So pretty similar to what we honestly saw a few weeks ago. Back in late August, we had a severe weather event here. Very similar setup, in my opinion, for that tornado threat. And eventually, as we go into the evening hours, around probably about 5 to 9 o'clock, we're also going to be watching for a conditional tornado threat back over in the Kansas City area. So definitely make sure that you are being weather aware if you're in those areas. Now, here's what we're looking at for the timing for today. So notice some showers and thunderstorms out there this morning. This is not the severe weather event. The severe weather event will kick off probably around 3 to 4 o'clock this afternoon, where storms will quickly fire off across eastern Minnesota. Notice how they're mostly discrete or semi-discrete initially. Those are the ones that are going to produce the higher hail threat and also the wind threat and also the tornado risk. Once we get closer to about 5, 6 o'clock, those storms continue to push east. Notice how they become a little bit more disorganized, but any storms that can still stay organized, especially on the southern side of this activity, which I think will be in southeast Minnesota, will have a better shot at producing a tornado risk. As we go into the evening hours, these storms do become more disorganized, becoming more of a wind threat and also some large hail. And then eventually after sunset, these storms are becoming much more disorganized with just wind for the most part across Wisconsin, but maybe an isolated brief tornado. And then notice as we go into the evening hours near Kansas City, there will be some thunderstorm activity that will attempt to initiate. Depending on how discreet discreet this is, we very easily could see an isolated tornado, but again, it's a conditional risk. I think hail and wind will be the main concerns there. And then as we go closer to midnight, these storms continue to push to the east. Most of them are dying out before they actually get to Lake Michigan. So if you're near like Chicago, for example, or Milwaukee, more than likely just some gusty winds and maybe a couple rumbles of thunder overnight. And then eventually this all dies out as we go into Friday morning. And then we might see a couple more storms Friday afternoon, but I'm not really looking at much of a severe weather concern, in my opinion, for the Ohio Valley on Friday. I do think as we go into next week, though, there might be 1 or 2 days to watch for some isolated severe weather. We'll talk about that, by the way, here in just a moment. Now, here's what the HRRR model shows for the entire country as we go into this afternoon. I just want to kind of point out that the extent of this thunderstorm activity will actually be as far south as Oklahoma. So just notice there will be a few storms that fire up. Again, they'll be mostly isolated to widely scattered, but maybe some isolated hail and wind, depending on if capping is an issue back down in Oklahoma. Now, the weather beyond today is honestly going to be relatively interesting. I think it's going to get very interesting, especially next week, where we are going to be dealing with 2 different things. The first of which is going to be another trough ejection over the Rocky Mountains. This trough looks to be a bit more organized than the one we're dealing with now, and this will probably bring at least rain to areas in the Central Plains, the Midwest, and the Ohio Valley, but I do think it's going to bring another round of severe weather to areas in the Central Plains, the Midwest, and also the Ohio Valley. As we go into Sunday through Tuesday, that'll be the time frame to watch for as that trough moves to the east-northeast, basically going right over the Great Lakes. And then as we go later into next week, things become a little bit quieter for the most part, but here's where the catch 101 is. We are going to be watching for a potential tropical system to move into the Gulf of Mexico sometime during the middle or end of next week. Depending on the timing, this could be a big-time hurricane. If it's a very slow-moving hurricane where we have a ridge in place, this thing could just sit in the Gulf of Mexico and intensify near the tail end of next week. But if we do have troughing like the GFS shows, this also could go right into Florida and be a slightly weaker hurricane in nature if it does develop. So this is something that we need to watch for very closely. Obviously, the GFS model right now does indicate this hurricane literally just sitting in the Gulf of Mexico throughout all of next weekend. Now, again, this is not even a thing yet. It has not developed yet, so we don't really know what's going to happen yet. But we do have to watch this closely because this could be a big hurricane in the Gulf of Mexico if it does develop. And let's go through the future radar and give you a better idea of what's going to be happening over the next several days. This is what it looks like as we go into Sunday. We'll have that trough moving across the Central Plains. This is going to spur up a lot of showers and thunderstorms from the Midwest back into the Central Plains. Definitely some beneficial rainfall. We'll be watching for a low-end threat for severe weather on Sunday back over in Kansas, Missouri, and Oklahoma. Doesn't look too concerning. Not really looking at any sort of outbreak at this point, at least for right now. I don't see it being an outbreak on Sunday. Once we go into Monday, this trough will move into the Midwest, bringing some showers and thunderstorms along with it. We'll be watching for another low-end threat for severe weather, probably in Illinois and Indiana, maybe Ohio as well. Again, I'm not really too concerned about Monday either. There will be instability. There will be some wind shear, but it just doesn't look like an outbreak. Once we go into Tuesday, we'll be watching for that trough to move over the Great Lakes, bringing some more beneficial rainfall to areas like West Virginia that desperately need it, back into Pennsylvania and New York. There might even be some showers and thunderstorms back down in Texas and Oklahoma during the middle of next week. And then once we go into the tail end of next week, things get very dry across the United States, leading to the potential for some sort of tropical storm or hurricane in the Gulf of Mexico. You might be thinking this looks extremely scary. Well, again, the system has not even developed yet, and the GFS model is indicating this major hurricane, potentially Cat 4 or 5 hurricane. But again, we don't really know what's going to happen with this yet. It could be a very weak hurricane. It could be a very intense hurricane. It could go towards Florida. It could go towards Texas. There's really no knowledge right now that we have that we can really make a prediction off of. But we are watching this closely if it does develop in the Western Caribbean Sea. There are a lot of scenarios right now. The GFS model currently hinting that this could be a big time system moving into areas like Florida and the Gulf Coast. But again, we don't really know what's going to happen yet. Make sure to subscribe to the channel. We'll keep you posted with the latest on this and as well as the severe weather potential, as we'll probably be live later today.